Welcome to the Posture Pros. Welcome to our show. Today we're going to be talking about really why our risks of falls increase as we age. We're going to go over basically the three top things that we kind of think about. We'll also kind of have some tests for you to do, at home for you to evaluate your risks of falls currently. And we're going to go over basically some three exercises that we would recommend to help you in terms of decreasing those risks of falls.
I think everybody knows that falls are problematic in those later years in life, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100. And I don't think it would be a surprise to anybody to know that from, a young age, once, you're not obviously a toddler, but from those young years, 10 years and up, that there's like this slow increase, a linear increase in risk of falling as we age. And so today we want to break down or help people understand why that risk is there. And so always you can sort of do some work on yourself to prevent that or lessen that risk.
Yeah. So number one on the list of what could increase your risk of falls is postural breakdown.
Yeah.
Right? So basically the more distorted our posture, the greater the risk.
And so let's kind of try and describe why that would be. So you have to think about posture. We were meant to have a certain kind of posture, okay? So when we're looking at someone from the side, the ear should be in line with the shoulder, right? So we think of the hole in the ear in line with the seam of the shoulder. The seam of the shoulder shirt should be in line with that dot that you would have on your pants, and that dot would ideally be lined up over top of my ankle. Okay? And so that's where we have what's called a good center of gravity. We got a good stable base. So the weight of, head to torso is centered over my hips. I've got good balance. Now, Dr. Dan mentioned the more distorted we are. So if I have this distorted posture where my head and shoulders tend to round forward, and now everybody could probably appreciate that my shoulder is in front of my hip. If I trip in this position, I'm going to fall, or I have much less chance of being able to catch myself. Or just if we think about it, if Dr. Dan just kind of gives me a little push in this position, I have a hard time holding my balance. But now if I hold myself upright and he gives me that same push, I barely move, right? So trying to understand that how that distorted posture really throws us off of our center of balance. It is a significant risk for falling. And so the more distorted it is, the higher that risk.
Right, and especially now we're filming this just kind of the start of winter, slippery sidewalks, streets. So one thing that you could do to minimize those risks is really be conscious of where head, shoulders, hips are when you're going and walking the dog or taking a walk on the street. Be really conscious of where that posture sits.
Okay, so we'll review some exercises after to help work on that posture. So the number 2 risk factor is sort of a lack of use of our balance, right? We don't challenge ourselves as we get older in terms of what we call proprioception, which is a fancy word for saying balance and awareness of where your body is in space. If you think about, I think about my kids, at home, they're constantly climbing on the couch, they're trying to jump off, they're tumbling, they're doing things, and I think it's like this intuitive, innate development to build balance, right? To build that awareness. But then we get older, we want to be safer, we don't like risks, and so sometimes the extent of our balance challenge is walking from the kitchen table to the couch.
Right, and the downside of that is now your body is not as challenged, right? Think of it, if you're working out and you want to build a muscle, it needs resistance, it needs a challenge to be stronger and more capable. But same thing it happens with our balance. If we're not challenging our balance, that just becomes weaker over time. So we're not as able to adapt and change and obviously stay safe.
So we're not hoping that everybody's going to become a big wave surfer and be able to have like the ultimate balance, but just a little bit of work on a daily basis to slightly challenge our balance and proprioception can go a long way, same thing, to mitigate or lower that fall risk.
And number 3 is our overall strength. And I think that could be kind of easy to understand is, again, here is if we have that slight trip or that little bit of a slip, it's our ability to be in an unstable position, but have the strength to self-correct, push us back into that position. If we don't have that strength, all of a sudden our body or joints could collapse, and then that's when we slip and fall. So strength helps to maintain that proper position and keep you safe when the conditions aren't ideal.
There was actually a great study that was done by a company that has sort of like a balance assessment. And they took a very large number of what they call geriatric patients, and they looked at those patients, their fall risk over time. So they compared a group that did not do any exercise versus a group that did what they called a GeriFit program, which was basic strength training, some light dumbbells, some light resistance training, some core strength. And they looked over a certain number of years of how many of those patients fell and, obviously how bad the outcome was. And the reduction in fall risk was substantial by just getting a little bit stronger. And these are people starting in like the 6th, 7th, and 8th decade of life. So think about mitigating that fall risk if you're doing some strength training, in your teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on.
So now what we want to do is give you really 3 tests that you can do at home to self-evaluate and see, okay, where are my risks, or how high are my risks of either falls or for injuries? Then we're going to go over the 3 best exercises that you could do.
So let's head to the wall. Okay, so in the paper that I just referenced, where they were comparing those 2 populations, the way that they measured the postural breakdown was using this, what they call occiput to wall test. So you're going to have the person, if you want to check out their posture, you're going to have them stand against the wall. The heels are against the wall, the hips are touching the wall, and the shoulders touch the wall, okay? Now an excellent or perfect test would be the back of the head is touching the wall, okay? Now the other thing too is keeping the gaze, the eyes on horizon, okay? So a cheating this test would be, Dr. Dan, go ahead and try and look up at the ceiling to squeeze your head back further, right? So someone's in this posture, they could try and lift their head back and look at the ceiling. Well, that's cheating the test. So the eyes have to remain level with horizon, okay? So a moderate or poor score, right, would be anything from 2 to 4 centimeters off the wall. So if I'm measuring the distance between the back of his head and the wall, okay, so if I'm trying to measure that distance, if it is 2 to 4 centimeters, that's a poor score. If that distance will go even further, let's say that distance was over 4 centimeters, that is a very poor score, okay? And so those that had over 4 centimeters of distance between the back of the head and the wall scored significantly poorer on their fall tests or their fall risks and overall assessments.
So the second test that you can do is, this one will be to measure your balance. So basically all you want to do is you want to have 1 foot off the floor, and the goal would be to stay in that position for 30 seconds. If you're able to do for 30 seconds, that's a good score. If now you're wobbling and not able to hold your foot up for more than 5, 10, 20 seconds, that means that your balance needs some work, and we're going to give you some stretches and exercises to work on after this.
Okay, number 3, we want to test strength, but we want to test strength, balance, and agility all at the same time. We're going to use the timed get up and go test. This is a valid measurement to assess your fall risk, okay? So Dr. Dan is going to demonstrate this test in a moment here. First, to understand the setup, we have a chair, and ideally it's a chair that doesn't have any arms because you're not supposed to push yourself up. The idea is to lift your body weight yourself. He's going to get up, he's going to walk to the white marker here, which is measured 10 feet from the center of the chair. He's going to walk around it, go back and sit down, at which time we would stop the timer, okay? So, an excellent score would be around 4 seconds. That's just about as fast as someone can do it. And then a problematic score is anything above 14 seconds. So above 14 seconds, we see your fall risk just go through the roof. So Dr. Dan, go ahead and show us how to perform this test. Okay, so he gets up, he walks around, and he's back in the chair, and that was probably just under 4 seconds. Okay, so that would be an excellent score. So again, the goal is to do this as fast as you can without running, doing it safely without falling, and trying to get the best score possible. Remembering that 4 seconds is kind of the top end, and we really want to be under 14. The closer to 14, the higher the fall risk. Above 14, significantly problematic. Okay, so we just finished showing you how to assess yourself at home for postural breakdown, for quality of balance, and then the time get up and go test to see what your strength agility was like. So now what we want to do is, depending on your scores on those, or if you feel like you didn't test properly or you could do better, we're going to give you specific exercises. One to work on posture, one to work on the balance, and then one to become stronger. Okay? So the very first one we want to do is an exercise we've already videoed. It's called the wall angel. So for a basic wall angel, you could go back to our YouTube page and look at the wall angel that we've done standing. But because we've already showed you this, for those that want a little bit more advanced version, we're going to show you a version on the floor that you could do that's going to give you a really strong hamstring stretch at the same time, which would benefit most people that are probably going to have that distorted posture. So you can see Dr. Dan got down to the floor. So his goal here, same thing, he's trying to get his hips as close to the wall as possible. And he'll probably tell you that the more he brings his hips to the wall, the more he's going to feel that hamstring stretch right away. So if those hamstrings are stretching, guess what? The wall angel will be way more challenging. So he's trying to get his hips to the wall, his shoulders, and his head. Okay, just like we do a regular wall angel, his elbows are going to come up to 90 degrees. He rotates his hands. He's got his 5 points of contact. And then if he can, he's going to do that wall angel, press up to the ceiling, and come back down. Okay? And just as we always prescribe this exercise for people that are trying to work on posture, we want to get 2 to 3 sets throughout the day where we're doing 10 slides like this, nice and slow. So 2 to 3 sets, 10 slides, nice and slow. Okay? So that is the exercise to function to work on posture. Number 2, we want to work on that balance, right? So to work on our balance, funny enough, the exercise to get better at balance is the same as the assessment. So what Dr. Dan would do is he'd take his watch and he would try to measure his time standing on one leg, right? He would get to 30 seconds. Let's say you get to 30 seconds quite easily on one foot. Now we can give you a stronger challenge. So you could try and do that with eyes closed. That is substantially harder. Okay? If you're not ready for eyes closed, then we could just sort of create an unstable surface. So, we could take a towel at home, you could roll up a towel. These are some soft foam pads. So if he's standing on an unstable surface, now there's way more what we call proprioceptive or balance challenge, right? So the gold standard, any of these that you're doing, you're trying to accumulate 30 seconds per leg. Same thing, repeating 2 to 3 times per leg throughout the day. Lastly, we want a simple exercise that's going to really work the legs and the hips, and we're going to practice getting into that chair position. Because if you're struggling on the time get up and go test, you can see he's creating a chair, or we call a wall sit. So he's sitting against the wall, his legs are horizontal to the floor, and his shins here are at 90 degrees. So we're creating a perpendicular. His hips are touching shoulders and head. Now the goal here would be to hold yourself for 30 seconds. That would be a good starting point. Okay? If you can increase that and get to 2-3 minutes, that would be excellent or elite. But by all means, try and increase that time to 2 to 3 minutes per wall sit if you can. Okay? So same thing. He would do it 30 seconds to start. He would take a break, relax, repeat 2 to 3 times throughout the day, increasing that time frame as you get stronger. Now let's say this is problematic because you don't have the strength to start there. You have a knee issue. Dr. Dan can come up, right? And he can come up as high as he needs to be able to do this safely and without falling. And so again, that's more of a, we'll call it a 60-degree angle. If he needs even more, he could go up to 75 or 80 degrees. And if you need to, you could bring the feet a little bit closer to the wall. It will make it a little bit easier. So there are safer or easier variations to start with if you're concerned about getting into that L-sit position. So hopefully you can try those 3 exercises at home, give them a shot. The nice thing is you can measure them and hopefully improve over time and then redo your assessments.
So now hopefully you had the chance to test yourself in terms of what is your balance, agility, strength, and you've gotten an idea of what the best stretches and exercises that you could do to help improve that overall balance. But just number 1 is be aware. Where are you at? What's your posture like? But now you have the steps to get those things done to improve your balance and obviously keep you safer. So with that information, hopefully that helps you overall, and have a great rest of your day.